For spine-chilling true tales of sinister trespassing, unexplained horrors revealed. The night lay heavy over Maplewood, a typically quiet suburb where every house whispered secrets. As shadows danced, the air thickened with a sense of foreboding. In an unassuming home, Sarah kissed her son, Tommy, goodnight, unaware that malevolent eyes were watching just beyond the comforting glow of her porch light. The heart of this idyllic neighborhood was about to shatter into a million terrified pieces. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was Kay, her frazzled neighbor. "Sarah. You have to lock your doors. I saw them again, the figures that walk in the night." Her voice trembled with panic. Sarah dismissed it at first, attributing it to Kay's overactive imagination. But as days unfolded, unsettling signs began to manifest. Footprints traced sinister patterns in her garden, shadows flitted just out of reach, and Tommy woke, screaming of the man in the dark. Each night, darkness tiptoed closer. One eerie evening, a tapping echoed in the stillness. Sarah's heart raced as she cautiously approached the window, dread pooling in her stomach. It was Mr. Collins, her neighbor and Tommy's babysitter, standing beneath the flickering streetlight, his grin twisted unnaturally, a predator cloaked in familiarity. A shiver snaked down her spine. What happened to the kind man she trusted? The atmosphere thickened with hidden truths. She confronted local police, but they shrugged off her concerns. Something was wrong, and she felt the walls closing in. Who could she trust? Those neighbors, once warm and friendly, now morphed into unrecognizable neighbors who held secrets as dark as the moonless night. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Desperation gnawed at her resolve. She began piecing together the fragments of the broken trust that enveloped her home like a smothering blanket. Mr. Collins had always been too good to be true. Buried beneath his friendly demeanor was a darkness that threatened to consume them both. Nights became sleepless as Sarah pondered her options: confront him or flee into the unknown. But then whispers slithered through the dark. "Tommy, where are you?" It was Colin's voice, soft and inviting, yet eerie. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she peered outside. The shadows around their home grew thick, twisting as if alive, ready to snatch her away. Fear coiled tightly in her chest, and a sickening realization swept over her: the nightmare wasn't just outside, it lurked too close to home, penning her into a desperate corner. As she readied herself for confrontation, the air grew colder, thick with an encroaching terror. Shadows wove around the house, pulling tighter, and she knew this was only the beginning. Would she and Tommy survive this escalating horror, or would they become yet another ghost in Maplewood's night? Sarah's heart pounded like a drum in her ears, each beat echoing the fear clawing at her insides. She backed away from the window, her hands trembling against the cool wood of the frame. The darkness outside felt as if it was intruding into her very being, a suffocating presence forcing her back. Tommy. All she could think about was Tommy. He was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the danger slinking closer with each passing hour. The tapping resumed, this time sharper, more insistent. It became a relentless percussion that threatened to shatter her sanity. Grabbing her phone, she glanced at the glowing screen, desperate for a solid connection to the outside world. No missed calls. No texts. Panic surged as she silently cursed the neighbors who once filled her with warmth. What if there were no allies among them? What if Mr. Collins was just the beginning? With a swift flick, she pulled the curtain aside just a sliver, praying the shadows stayed distant. But to her horror, she saw figures moving in the darkness, gliding soundlessly amidst the trees. They were tall and cloaked, their features obscured. Each one seemed to pulse with an unearthly rhythm, as if drawn to the very heartbeat of her home. She swallowed hard, unsure whether to scream or run. The door creaked open. She turned to see Tommy, rubbing his sleepy eyes, stepping into the hallway. "Mommy? What's wrong?" His small voice shattered her silence, pulling her from the depths of terror. "Tommy, stay back," she whispered harshly, her voice shaking. "Get away from the door." But her son, innocent and trusting, didn't he understand? His little feet shuffled forward, curiosity pulling him toward the surroundings filled with unfathomable horrors. The very ground felt as if it would erupt beneath their feet. All the while, the shadows outside grew bolder, inching towards her home as if tasting the air for her fear. Logically, she knew she needed to do something fast. However, the blankets of terror wrapped tightly around her throat dulled her thoughts, rendering her immobile. Suddenly, the door swung open wider, and in stepped Mr. Collins, face illuminated in a ghastly sheen of moonlight, the smile still plastered across his face. "Ah, Sarah, I was just checking. I thought I heard Tommy." His voice dripped with an unsettling sweetness, a snake hiding behind a mask of charm. "Get away from him!" Sarah shouted, protective instincts taking over, pushing Tommy back behind her. Her heart raced as she weighed her options. Calling for the neighbors was futile. She couldn't risk involving anyone else. A reaction could cost them both dearly. "I was only being a good neighbor," Collins said, tilting his head in feigned innocence. The shadows danced across his form, twisting his features into grotesque variations. And then, another figure emerged from behind him, cloaking themselves in the darkness, their outlines suggestive of a sharp blade glinting in the dim light. "Sarah," whispered the newcomer. Her pulse roared in her ears. It was a voice she dreaded. A voice she recognized. "Kay. We all just want to help." A surge of adrenaline flooded her veins. "Help?" She scoffed, glancing back at the shadows that lurked, knowing they would be lost in the chaos. "Help is the last thing you bring." In that moment, Sarah understood what they were prepared to do. She glimpsed the truth lurking behind friendly facades. The neighborhood held horrors that would consume her and her child. Desperation ignited, she couldn't let fear ensnare her. She grabbed Tommy's hand, resolve flooding her system. "We need to go now," she whispered fiercely, her grip tightening around her son. They had to escape this web before it fully closed, but just then, the figures outside converged, their hands reaching toward her, a cacophony of whispers filling the night. Would anyone believe her when she ran? Could she escape the very place she thought was home? As darkness claimed them, she knew the battle for survival had truly begun. What would she have to do to protect Tommy? Was it too late to save them both? The air thickened around Sarah as she felt the gravity of the moment. Tommy tugged at her hand, confusion clouding his innocent face. "Mommy, what's happening? Just hold on tight," she insisted, her voice trembling yet firm, propelling them back toward the heart of the house. She needed to create distance, barrier between them and the smiling menace that intruded her sanctuary. The whispers grew louder, angry, rising like a tide of putrid sound. It was wrong. Everything felt wrong. The darkness pulsed, and she could almost see it breathe. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to break away from the grasp of the shadows that seemed to stretch and reach for them. "Please, let us just talk," Collins said, his voice sweet but laced with something vile. The sinister undertone crawled underneath her skin, igniting her dread. Any negotiations would only unveil more horrors. As they barreled through the hallway, the flickering lights overhead cast quick shadows against the walls. Each flicker felt like a warning, a countdown. Fear surged with each pulse. The enemy was closing in. "Mommy, what's outside?" Tommy's voice trembled like the leaves against a chilling wind. She bit her lip, forcing herself to keep moving. "Nothing we can't handle," she replied, the lies spilling from her lips thicker than the darkness surrounding them. She reached for the back door with urgency but pulled her hand back, something in her gut twisting. That door, it was their exit but also the path to unknown dangers lurking out there. What awaited them outside was as horrendous as the twisted faces stalking them in the moonlit corridor. Suddenly, a crash echoed throughout the house, and they paused. Behind them, the front door splintered under the weight of the figures, their eagerness belying their graceful glides. The sound shattered her last semblance of hope. "Go to the basement," Sarah shouted, her mind racing for a refuge. "Now!" She shoved Tommy ahead of her, their small feet pattering against the wooden floors, the thundering footsteps of aberrant neighbors hot on their trail. The basement door was known to be ominous, dark and suffocating, barely used since moving in. Yet now, it felt like their only chance. The latch clicked open, light swallowed as Sarah thrust them down the creaking staircase. "Mommy!" Tommy cried, his voice smaller, lost in the pitch black. "Just be quiet," Sarah whispered harshly, scanning the shadows that loomed in the corners. The basement reeked of damp earth and despair. She felt around until her fingers brushed against a flashlight. She flicked it on, illuminating mere ghostly glimpses of dusty shelves and cobwebs, a prison of memories, but their momentary relief shattered when they heard it, a low, dragging sound clawing up the wooden steps. The rhythm was deliberate, malicious. They were coming, more menacing than before. "Mommy, I'm scared," Tommy whimpered, his tiny body pressed against hers, a tremor rolling through him. "Shush," she breathed, gripping him tightly. The flashlight flickered unervingly. "We have to stay quiet. They won't find us if we are silent." Just then, the basement door creaked open above them, and shadows cascaded down the steps, pooling like liquid darkness at the bottom. Sarah's heart threatened to burst. She glanced side to side, searching for another way out, anything to stave off the encroaching blackness. The darkness pooled around the bottom step. "I can smell your fear, Sarah," whispered a slithering voice from above, chilling her marrow. In that suffocating moment, Sarah realized there was nowhere to go. No escape awaited them, only choices that could haunt her forever. How much would she sacrifice to keep her son safe? The whispering figures descended slowly, revealing their glowing eyes. Fear sank its claws deeper within her. What would she have to give up? And as the shadows closed in, she prepared herself for one final stand. But before she could act, the very ground beneath her began to shiver, the house trembled, and the whispers transformed into a howl that filled every crevice of her mind. What were they? Could they truly be stopped? Would anyone remain after tonight? As Sarah steeled herself for the coming storm, the world shifted and changed, and she realized she might be fighting not just for survival but something unspeakably twisted. What awaited them in the depths of the night, and would any of them ever see dawn again? The howl subsided, but the echoes of its terror lingered in the air like a bitter aftertaste. The shadows paused, as if assessing, tasting the thickness of Sarah's fear. She squeezed Tommy's hand, feeling the tremor in his grip. "Mommy, I can't breathe," he whispered, panic hitching his voice. She pulled him closer, feeling his small frame trembling against hers. They were trapped in a nightmare of their own making, surrounded by swirling darkness and the promise of something dreadful. The flashlight flickered again, momentarily casting light against the cold, damp walls. As the brief glow pulsed, Sarah focused on a small window high above, a reminder of the outside world, a world of safety. Though it felt leagues away, it was the only shred of hope left. "Look, Tommy." She pointed, her voice steadying. "If we can reach that window, maybe we can get out." But her heart sank as she watched the shadows elongate, begin to inch closer. "Mommy!" Tommy cried out, eyes wide and frantic. "They're gonna get us." She silenced him with a finger pressed against her lips, but then froze as an unforgiving scrape echoed from the steps. The shadows sensed their resolve and began to gather, a swirling mass of malevolence. "Do you see this, Sarah?" That caustic voice slithered through the darkness again, sending a shiver down her spine. "This is your making. Your fear's your weakness. Heavy breaths rattled in her throat as she pushed Tommy back against the cold wall, shielding him from the encroaching figures. For a moment, her instincts clashed with despair. She could fight. She could protect him. "Stay behind me," she ordered, gripping the flashlight tighter. The moment the beam landed on the advancing figures, she saw them clearer, a blend of familiar faces twisted in grotesque, smiling masks. Each one was a neighbor she once greeted, a smiling stranger with secrets buried beneath their skin. The flashlight began to stutter again, the light fading, and with it, her courage. Panic flared in her chest like a wildfire. She swung the beam wildly as the darkness surged forward, sucking the air from the basement like a vacuum. "I'm not afraid of you," she shouted, her voice shaking, the fight sparking in her eyes. It was a lie. But she was a mother, and as long as Tommy stood by her side, she would maintain this charade. She had to. With a last desperate flick of the wrist, she aimed for the basement door. "Run for it!" she cried, pushing Tommy ahead of her. Shadows lunged, reaching out with ghostly hands, their fingers brushing against her back. A cold dread seeped into her bones. But Tommy hesitated, looking back at the noise, at the voices calling his name, promising him safety. "Mommy, wait! Don't look back!" she screamed, vision blurring as she felt them claw for her. They couldn't take him. They wouldn't. She shoved him toward the door, praying he'd have the strength to make it through the chaos. She had to believe he could escape. As she turned to face the darkness, she felt something wrap around her ankle, yanking her down. The whispers grew louder, deafening as they echoed in her mind, drowning out all rational thought. The figures melded together, their voices blending into a haunting chorus, mocking, taunting. "Come join us, Sarah," they sang, a sinister plea rippling through her head, drawing her down into a suffocating embrace. Tommy's panicked cries faded as the last glimmer of hope ebbed. Something snapped inside her. She wouldn't go down without a fight. "No!" she roared, digging her nails into the cold wood, anchoring herself against the tide. "You won't take us. Not today." But was that enough? As the sounds of darkness closed in, she felt fear clawing for her heart, and the shadows flourished around her. What she had to resist, the whispers, the hands, the pull of the familiar, all surged against her, desperate, and as Sarah struggled against the suffocating darkness, the last flicker of the flashlight extinguished, plunging them into a void where hope had no place. What would she sacrifice to keep her son safe as the shadows tightened their grip? Would it be worth the cost? And in the depths of the night, as the final scream echoed into silence, a choice had to be made. The darkness closed in with a vengeance, swallowing every sound, every thought. Sarah felt the weight of the void pressing against her body, squeezing her with an unyielding grip. She wrestled with shadows that felt more substantial than the damp walls around her. "Mommy!" Tommy's voice, fragile, terrified, rang out from somewhere beyond her grasp. The world around him was a haze, yet she could still feel his warmth, like a flickering flame in this encroaching night. "Tommy!" she screamed, her throat raw. It was all-consuming, the fear that she could lose him forever. Why hadn't she moved faster? Why hadn't she pushed him harder? The walls creaked, a sound like bones grinding together. The shadows pulsed and writhed, hungry for their next victim. Sarah's heart raced against the thick silence, each thud like a drumbeat drowning in dread. Summoning whatever strength she had left, she clawed her way toward the last spot she remembered, Tommy. "Hold on to me!" she shouted, desperate. Her fingers stretched out, blindly seeking him through the thickening dark. As if in response, icy fingers gripped her wrist, tugging at her with a force she couldn't comprehend. She recoiled, the cold seeping into her skin, but she couldn't let fear paralyze her. "Not now." Sarah, the voices sang, that familiar tone laced with malice. "Let go, it's easier this way." With a jolt, she pulled her arm back, breaking free of their grasp. You won't take me either. She screamed into the void, her defiance igniting a flicker of light that pushed against the dark around her. Tommy. She thought she heard a whimper, a soft rustle. Turning, she felt a shift in the air, and then suddenly, a beam of faint light illuminated the basement once more, casting eerie shapes along the walls. Tommy stood just a few feet away, eyes wide, mouth agape with fear. Mommy. They're right behind you. Sarah shifted, dread pooling in her gut as she felt it, a presence looming closer. The horrid, twisted faces sprang into focus, mouths stretching into mocking grins. Each one of the neighbors revealed more dark secrets than she could imagine, tainted expressions burned into her mind. Run. Get out. She commanded, but her words barely reached him. Join us, Sarah, they chanted, the sounds curling around her like smoke, clinging tight. Every step she took felt heavier, as if the shadows were dragging weights in her soul. With a cry of frustration, she charged forward, grabbing Tommy by the wrist. He shivered beneath her grip, but his eyes sparkled with an ember of resilience. What about the window? The window. She echoed, remembering the glimmer of hope she had seen before. Yes, we can reach it. Stay with me, Tommy. They turned to make their escape, but the shadows surged, morphing into limbs and faces that clawed at them. Panic struck a divine chord between them, pushing them into action. The once familiar echoes now sounded like a tempest, urging them to flee. Tugging Tommy along, they stumbled toward the window, breathless, the darkness clawing at their backs as if desperate to pull them apart. Sweat dripped down Sarah's brow, stinging her eyes, blurring the dim light ahead into a hazy reflection of despair. There was no going back. Just a little further. She gasped, tightening her hold, feeling the warmth of his small body beneath her fingers. Suddenly, all went still. The cacophony of whispers faded to a deafening silence. The shadows paused, almost confused. Sarah risked a glance back. But when she turned, instead of the grasping shadows, all she saw was a wall of thick, suffocating black. Mommy, Tommy's voice trembled. And in that moment of trepidation, something shifted. The room flickered, as if caught between two realities, and the wall began to ripple. Light shimmered uneasily, shadows battling against the brightness. Sarah, a voice broke through the quiet, familiar yet twisted. You really think you can escape? You are part of us now. The window loomed ever closer, but as Sarah stepped forward, the ground shook beneath them. With an ear-splitting crack, the shadows surged back to life, howling in a chorus of torment. Stay strong. We can make it. She shouted, pulling Tommy toward the shimmering light. But just as they reached the window, it began to close, the light retreating. Tommy, jump. Now. The window's edges vanished like smoke, leaving her with a gut-wrenching choice: save her son or risk it all in the darkness that still called her name. Would her sacrifice be enough to break the curse, or was this only the beginning of her horror? In that heartbeat, a choice loomed heavy in her hands, darkness swallowing any faint hope that lingered in the basement. Jump. Sarah's screaming voice sliced through the confusion, but Tommy faltered. Mommy. He cried, his tiny hands trembling in hers. The shadows swirled, their claws trailing like smoke across her skin, filling her with dread. Her heart thundered. Seconds stretched like eternity, and she felt the chill creeping deeper, wrapping around her soul. Now, Tommy. I'll be right behind you. He hesitated again, glancing back at the darkness that seemed to pulse with anger. The faces of their neighbors twisted into grotesque masks, eyes glistening with anticipation. Mommy, I can't. With horror, she saw the glimmer of light begin to fade. Panic surged within her. She couldn't let it slip away. The thought of losing him, the thought of surrendering to that abyss overwhelmed her. Do it. Please. Just as he seemed to make up his mind, a howling screech erupted from the shadows, piercing the air. The noise was deafening, an otherworldly chorus urging them to give in to despair. "Sarah," it whispered, pulling at her very essence. "Let him go." Join us. A surge of rage ignited in her chest. "No!" she shouted, drawing Tommy closer, her fingers clutching him as if to shield him from the grasping darkness. "We fight. We don't give up." Her son's eyes filled with tears, but determination sparked within him, too. "I can do it, Mommy," he shouted, releasing her grasp. With a deep breath, he sprinted toward the shrinking window, feet pounding against the hard floor. "Tommy!" Sarah's heart lurched as he leapt. But just before he could slip through, a creature lunged, its claws outstretched, grasping at his ankles with deadly precision. She surged forward without hesitation, her own body colliding with the shadowy talon, sending a wave of icy pain radiating through her. "Jump!" she screamed, fear and love woven into each word. In that split second, as Tommy fought against the darkness, it felt like time hung in the air. The tension wavered like a tightly wound coil, ready to snap. Then, miraculously, he soared through the window's threshold. "Mommy!" he cried, the sound a fading echo as he disappeared into the light. Sarah's feet left the ground. She lunged after him, but she screamed in agony as a freezing hand seized her wrist, dragging her back. "You are ours, Sarah." The voice hissed, low and malicious, wrapping around her like thick, suffocating fog. She clawed at the air, desperation in her heart. "No! I want to let you take me." But the shadows pulsed with greedy hunger, consuming her resistance. The walls of the basement began to close in, a dark maw threatening to swallow her whole. She felt the air grow thick, choking her with despair. "Sarah," a chilling whisper coiled through the darkness, "you know this is where you belong. Embrace it." With a surge of frantic strength, Sarah tore free from the clawing shadows. Even as they dragged at her feet, she willed herself to move, pushing forward to where Tommy had escaped. Then, just as her fingertips grazed the cool ledge, an overwhelming darkness enveloped her, pulling her down into its depths. For a moment, she floated in an eerie, timeless void. The sound of whispers grew louder, filling her senses, circling her like vultures waiting for the moment of surrender. "Mommy, help!" Tommy's distant cry echoed from beyond, laced with fear. "Hold on. I'm coming," she shouted, but her words felt feeble, like blowing against a raging wind. It was hopeless, yet she had to fight. Fueled by love, she summoned every ounce of strength left in her body and lunged toward the sound. The darkness released her, and in that fleeting moment of light, she broke through. Yet, the shadows clung to her still, clawing at her insides as she burst through into the world above. But as she stumbled out, panting for air, the basement door slammed shut behind her. Tommy was nowhere to be seen. The night was haunted by silence, her heart raced with fear and dread. And then, a single whisper drifted through the air, chilling her to the core. "You can't run forever, Sarah, we'll find you." The last remnants of warmth seeped away, leaving her wrapped in a chilling blanket of dread. She took a trembling step backward, scanning the darkness surrounding her, knowing she hadn't escaped at all. What awaited her next? Would the shadows rend more than just her sanity? In the night's silence, the answer loomed, waiting to be unveiled. Sarah stumbled backward, the cold air biting at her skin like the shadows had before. She could still hear Tommy's voice echoing in her mind, a haunting reminder of the terror they faced together and the distance now stretching between them. Panic clawed at her throat, the realization that she was truly alone kicking in. The silence was a mockery, each heartbeat a reminder that the darkness held its breath, waiting. Soon, she could feel it creeping around her again, subtle yet sinister. It lurked just beyond the periphery of her vision, shifting like liquid smoke, wrapping around the corners of her mind. "Tommy!" she cried out, the name tearing from her throat raw and desperate. But the wind swallowed her words, no response flowing back to her. something shifted in the shadows. A movement, a flicker of dark shapes darting just beyond the tree line. Fear surged anew, urging her feet to move. She turned on her heel, heart racing, and stumbled toward the road. The streetlights flickered above, too dim, too distant, reminding her of her fragile humanity against the encroaching night. As she moved, the ground beneath her seemed to pulse, thrumming to a dark rhythm only she could feel. The call of the shadows throbbed louder in her ears, and she clutched her head, whispering to herself, "Stay strong. Stay focused." Suddenly, a low growl rose from behind her, a sound almost familiar yet deeply unsettling. Her head snapped around, searching the inky gloom. The growl morphed into a cacophony of whispers, blending into a wind that seemed to caress her ears and beckon her back into despair. "Leave her be," a voice slithered through the tangled night, ethereal and mocking, "come join the rest of us." The ground continued its relentless tremor beneath her feet, as if the earth itself were begging her to surrender. Sarah gritted her teeth, tears stinging her eyes. "I want to," she shouted defiantly to the darkness, "I want to let you take me." Yet, the shadows coiled tighter around her. Glimpses of faces, those of her neighbors, flashed before her eyes, twisted and grinning, eyes hollow and hungry. The sight twisted her stomach in knots and filled her with a primal scream of terror. She took a step back, suddenly teetering on the edge of reality as the memories of Tommy's laughter slipped through her fingers, each laugh echoing in the pit of her stomach. Were they truly lost to her? From behind her, another whisper drifted in, chilling her spine. "Look behind you." Bullets of ice shot through her veins. Whirling around, she faced a silhouette emerging from the shadows, tall, emaciated, its elongated limbs stretching toward her with a grace that belied its twisted intent. The creature's eyes glowed like embers, capturing the flickering streetlight and reflecting her own fear back at her. "Tommy!" She screamed again, her voice cracking, but the shadows only laughed, a horrible cacophony of echoing sighs and muted cries, drowning out her hope. With no time left to lose, she turned, sprinting down the road. Each footfall thumped against her heart's tempo faster and faster, as laughter erupted behind her, shadowy tendrils chasing her down the street. They whispered lies, promising comfort and belonging if only she'd yield. Streetlights flickered as she fled, illuminating her frantic face, the horror written across her features illuminated for all to see. Please, where are you, Tommy?" she whispered, the streets closing in as she ran. But just ahead, a shape loomed in the distance. A silhouette that looked familiar yet indistinct. Hope flickered back to life in her chest, propelling her forward despite the terror clawing at her heels. "Mommy," a voice drifted through the air, soft and tentative, laced with despair. But was it real? Or another cruel trick of the shadows? She broke into a sprint, yearning to reach that figure. "Tommy!" But as she rushed closer, the familiar shape blurred, morphing into a dark mass just as it had before. "Please." The entity's grin widened, unveiling jagged teeth that glittered in the light, a mockery of every parental desire. The whispers crescendoed around her, filling her mind with chaos, a swirling vortex that threatened to drag her under. And in that moment of desperation, a thought pierced through her fear: what if this was all a trap? The shadows surrounded her as she hesitated, doubt creeping in. The voice, now taunting, echoed louder: "Come to us, Sarah, you can't escape." With heart pounding, she faced the oncoming darkness. Could she truly find Tommy, or even hope to escape at all? In that shattering second, the world seemed to tilt, and a deeper truth prowled beneath the surface. What if the very source of her terror was the only way to reunite with her son? The wind whispered secrets, and a primal dread flared within her. A choice loomed on the horizon: would she confront the darkness head-on, or surrender and join the haunting wail of despair? Which path would lead to salvation? The shadows beckoned, and Sarah's heart exploded with uncertainty, racing toward an answer that perhaps only the darkness knew. Her heart hammered in her chest as she stood there, caught between the shimmering thread of hope and the inviting lure of despair. The darkness swirled around her, alive, pulsing for her attention. She closed her eyes, sucking in a shuddering breath, weighing her options. Tommy, she whispered again. This time, doubt clouded her vision of his face. Was he really out there? Or was this another sinister illusion? A sharp intake of breath cut through her hesitation. Mommy, the voice, still faint and wavering, struck her like a lightning bolt. Was it real? Her blood pulsed with urgency, igniting her instincts. Tommy. Her voice pierced the night with a desperate clarity as she took a step forward. The shadows recoiled for a second, just long enough for her to feel the tiniest flicker of defiance. But then they surged back, and the air grew heavy, as if it was tangling her limbs in a web of darkness. The laughter returned, malicious and mocking, echoing all around her as branches rattled in sinister rhythm. They were alive, the shadows, and they didn't take kindly to her defiance. Leave her be, one voice hissed among the cacophony, this time darker, more menacing. She belongs here, with us. Heart thumping, she turned her gaze ahead, focusing on the shifting mass that had once looked like Tommy. With another desperate scream, she moved forward, knowing she had to break through the veil of terror. Each step elicited eerie whispers, rushing past her ears like cold wind, threatening to erase her very existence. Join us, the voices swirled with need, drawing closer, wrapping around her. They beckoned, tempting her with promises of solace, of reunion. Stop! Sarah shouted, her voice shaking as her hands trembled at her sides. She could feel her grasp on reality beginning to slip. I want to let you take me. Remarkably, a stillness fell for a moment, the shadows retreating, waiting as if considering her words. The darkness undulated softly, and she realized she had sparked something unexpected. But that pause shattered as the laughter boomed back, unholy and raucous. The shadows surged, pressing against Sarah with the weight of 1,000 fears. She felt their icy fingers skimming her skin, teasing the edges of her sanity. Tommy! She screamed, the name ripping through the crushing stillness like glass shattering. She wheeled around, seeking his face among the shifting shapes, her courage sparking against the overwhelming tide of fear, but in her frantic search, something else caught her eye, a glimmer amid the shadows. Was it a streetlight? A reflection? Or something more sinister? It pulsed, illuminating a path behind her. With hesitation, she turned toward the faint glow, its warmth beckoning to her as if daring her to step into the unknown. As she moved, the laughter quieted for a moment, but the whispers hung thick, threatening, tempting. Why not stay, Sarah? It's safer here with us. She shook her head violently, every instinct screaming to keep moving. Yet doubt crept in. What if she was wrong? What if surrender truly meant saving herself? Seconds stretched into lifetimes as she inched along the path, and then, emerging from the shadows, a familiar laughter broke through, childlike and pure. Mommy! Help me! A surge of hope flooded her senses, overshadowing the sinister voices. Tommy! But as she chased the sound, the shadows roared back, swirling violently, tightening their grip. She sprinted toward the glow, every molecule of her being fighting against the darkness threatening to drag her under. Don't let them get you. The voice called again, more distant this time, drifting like smoke away from her grasp. As she dashed toward the light, the ground shook violently beneath her, and the air grew thick with desperation. She held on tighter to that flicker of light, determined to break free, but then, a chilling realization hit her harder than the shadows enveloping her. What if there was no escape? What if all paths led back to the same horrifying choice? In that moment, the world tilted, and it felt as though the night itself roared in protest. The light grew blinding, sending cracks of illumination stabbing through the darkness. Just as fear threatened to overwhelm her, a voice echoed from within the depths, low and commanding, "You'll have to decide, Sarah. The truth awaits." And then, everything exploded into chaos. Shadows twisted and howled, converging on her, trying to latch onto her until she could barely breathe. With darkness closing in and hope unraveling, she lunged toward the light, mind racing. Could truth set her free, or would it be her downfall? The light flickered, hung in the balance, a promise and a warning. Each breath she took was sharper, more painful. As she reached out, her fingers grasped at the light, but then it started to fade. The shadows lunged, roaring and ready to engulf her completely. What was waiting on the other side? Would she uncover the truth behind the darkness or be consumed by it forever? And as she plunged forward, she realized some truths weren't meant to be faced. What lay ahead was beyond her wildest nightmares. The moment her fingers brushed against the light, a searing jolt shot through her, like fire igniting her very soul. She pulled back instinctively, the warmth both thrilling and agonizing. Meanwhile, the shadows around her twisted, stretching like spider silk, eager to reclaim their prey. Tommy! She screamed again, her voice hoarse and ragged. The name hung in the air, somehow tangible, twisting it further inside the darkness. If only she could penetrate the veil. If only she could see him, but the swirling mass pressed in, shrieking louder, feeding off her panic. Fear clawed at her throat, tightening around her breaths. "You can't have her," came a disembodied voice, sharp and bitter, slicing through the cacophony. It echoed around her like thunder, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. In that moment of desperation, a thought sparked. Perhaps it wasn't just Tommy she was searching for. What if he was more than mere flesh and blood? What if he was a part of something darker? A weapon for the shadows? No. She insisted loudly, shaking her head as she fought the despair creeping in. "He is my son. I will find him." The laughter morphed, dropping into discordant notes, taunting her. "Why fight it, Sarah?" It whispered, chilling her to the bone. "Join him forever." She felt the pull grow stronger, like a noose tightening around her. The shadows flickered along the edges of her vision, morphing into familiar faces: lost children, lost dreams. Each face begged for relief, each voice a reminder of the childhood innocence that echoed within her. "Mommy! Help me!" Tommy's voice called again, now a haunting melody amidst the dissonance. With a sudden surge of resolve, she pushed forward, allowing that ghostly glow to guide her. She could feel the darkness retreating at her very heels, a wild animal unwilling to let go completely. Step by step, she trod the fine line between salvation and annihilation, but as she neared the source of the light, an unanticipated force clawed at her ankles, dragging her back toward the shadows. Desperation burned brighter than the fear. "I want to let you take me," she screamed, her voice reverberating through the dim as if responding to her fury. The oppressive weight of the shadows lifted just enough for her to glimpse what lay beyond the glow. A figure stood there, half-shrouded. Tommy? The resemblance sent a gut-wrenching wave crashing into her. It could be him. Or was it another cruel trick? "Tommy!" She called again, hope igniting her chest like a spark. She could see the shape of a boy, reaching out, his small hand extended towards her, and in that moment, she felt the fabric of reality shudder. The air thickened, and for an instant, the darkness paused, as if in awe of her determination. "Help me!" The boy cried again, desperation bleeding through the bittersweet joy of recognition, but that glimmering light flickered, dimming with each passing second. Shadows squeezed together, dancing ominously, ready to pounce at her slightest falter. Fear wrapped around Sarah's heart, squeezing tighter with every breath. What would she face after crossing this boundary? What if the vision of her son was just an echo of her darkest regrets? The laughter grew louder, a violent wave crashing over her, drowning her in a sea of doubt. The flow of shadows congealed dangerously, urging her to submit to the darkness, embracing it as a retreat from the uncertainty of the light. With every inch she inched forward, the whispers escalated into a manic chorus. "Join us, Sarah. End the struggle. The truth is too painful." But clawed deep within her was a fierce resilience. Sarah's love had to be more powerful than the shadows, and with that hope, she pressed on. She could almost taste it. Freedom was within reach. Just as she reached out for the boy, her heart stopped. Something cold, something sinister grazed her arm. A hand? It gripped her tightly, swirling with darkness, trying to pull her back into the abyss. "Fight, Tommy!" she called out, not knowing what might lie ahead. "Fight for me!" As she took one last leap toward the twinkling warmth, she realized some choices demand every piece of courage we possess, sometimes even at the cost of our very souls, and behind her, the laughter shifted, fading into a cacophony of smothered sobs and anguished cries. What could rise from the ashes of sacrifice? Would she discover her truth, or fall prey to the very darkness that fed off her despair? The light flickered once more, its pulse synchronizing with her racing heart, leaving her with one haunting question: could love be enough to shatter the bonds of eternal darkness? Sarah felt the heat of determination flood her body as she charged toward the flickering warmth, her heart racing madly. The shadows closed in, swirling like a tempest, hungry for despair. But she wouldn't succumb, not now, not ever. "Tommy!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the chaos. The boy's form grew clearer, his little hand reaching for her, desperate and pleading. "Help me, Mommy!" He was so close, yet a gaping hole of darkness still loomed between them. She could almost touch him, almost feel that bond of love that had woven their existences together. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah lunged forward, her fingertips brushing against the warmth, just as the shadows lunged at her. Claws and fingers of darkness latched onto her, pulling and tugging, hungry for her fear. But each glimpse of Tommy gave her strength. "I want to let you take him," she screamed, pulling against their grip. The sheer force of her love ignited a flame within her. "Fight back," she thought, feeling the energy swell through her veins. "He needs me." And with that resolve, she began to push back against the darkness, channeling everything she had into her desire to protect her son. "Mommy!" Tommy cried again, his voice breaking. "I can't hold on." She felt panic claw at her throat. "I'm coming." Her heart thundered as she focused, narrowing her vision to the sliver of light and the boy's outstretched hand. The shadows screamed their defiance around her, their murmurs growing into a frenzied roar. But they were no match for a mother's love. With one last burst of strength, she dove toward the light, feeling the darkness scrape against her skin, trying to pull her back. And as she pierced the edge of shadow, the air shimmered, solidifying into a fragile barrier of clarity. In an instant, she grasped Tommy's hand, and like a chain breaking free, the light enveloped them both. The world around them shifted violently, rebelling against their defiance. Sarah felt the darkness recoil, howling in rage, twisting and contorting, yet she clung to her son, grit and resolve anchoring her. Together they surged through the light, tumbling out into the night, the concrete ground firm beneath their feet. Drenched in sweet coolness of reality, they gasped, bathed in a soothing glow. For the first time, Sarah dared to believe they were free, but the night was still heavy with echoes of shadows searching for purchase. She felt the pulse of darkness lingering in the corners of her mind, a reminder that the fight may never truly be over. "We have to go, Tommy. Now," she urged, lifting her son into her arms. Propelled by instinct as they stumbled through the neighborhood, uncertainty bobbed like a ghost on the horizon. The streetlights flickered, and the familiar streets felt more threatening, shadowed by all they had encountered. But Sarah felt the warmth of her boy in her arms, and that gave her courage. "Do you think they're gone?" he asked, voice trembling slightly, nestled against her neck. "For now," she breathed, which felt like a promise. "But we have to be ready. Always." Just then, a flicker caught her eye, caught both of their eyes. An image tore at her heart, a glance of their neighbors in the distance, faces twisted but familiar, right on the edge of the shadows. Fear gripped her heart again, but she wouldn't falter. "Come on, Tommy," she whispered, more to herself than him. "We're moving forward. Together." Heart pounding, they pressed on, the comforting weight of her son a constant reminder of what they had survived and what they still needed to protect. Darkness loomed behind them, but light was ahead, the promise of hope and healing. As they reached the end of the street, the dawn broke over Maplewood, a golden glow promising renewal. "It's going to be okay, baby," she murmured as they turned to face the rising sun. And with that, Sarah knew they would fight together through every shadow, every whisper, until the night completely faded. They were free, and the shadows were left behind, just a haunting memory of the battles they had faced and the bond that would carry them forward. Now that you've taken this journey with Sarah and Tommy, don't forget you need to subscribe to the channel immediately so you don't miss our next exclusive stories that will blow your mind. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the good vibes flowing. I want to hear your reactions. Flood that comment section with your thoughts and theories about the ending. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. True fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through your actions.